Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I have the pleasure to announce the last keynote of today with the theme View on the Private Sector Business Environment in Ghana. And I'm very pleased to having Hans-Peter Lankes here, who's Vice President Economics and Private Sector Development of IFC in Washington, D.C. Hans-Peter, please.
Panel. I hope that I can add some new perspectives on the business environment in the private sector in Ghana. First of all, I really want to use this opportunity to thank the Ghanaian and the German authorities for convening us here. What I've experienced so far, I found incredibly useful. It was both technical and visionary. It is going to help us going forward. There have been an impressive array of partners that you see here on the wall. Among those, I would like to highlight Norway, because it is perhaps not so visible here, who together with Germany have been financing the trust fund for the Compact with Africa, which is also helping us here today. And in particular, I want to get back to Minister Ofori-Atta in the morning, and of course the President of Ghana for their vision, for the momentum that they have been giving to reforms. This is what we're building on. Now, the Compact with Africa is still new, but it's beginning to prove valuable. It is a forum in which countries can present their plans. They can commit to these plans very publicly. That becomes a kind of discipline around those reform plans. They discuss them with the G20. The G20 itself commits to do what it can to help steer the business environment and the instruments available in the right direction to support private investment. So that format, and we're going to see it in full play next week, in the margins of the annual meetings of the World Bank and IMF. There will be a meeting of the G20 on the Compact with Africa, and we will hear where things stand in every country and how it is moving. We have all the institutions that are involved, and that was initially the international organizations, and now it is going to also encompass the bilateral development finance institutions. We have all been working on additional tools to support private investors, and I'd like to mention that if you go on the website of the Compact with Africa, which is maintained by the IMF, it's very easy to Google Compact with Africa. You will see the first thing comes up is that website. There is a very detailed, very valuable inventory of all the financing tools that are available to support private investors in the countries of the Compact with Africa from all the different institutions. That's a very valuable tool. Now, Ghana reflects very much the idea of the Compact. It's a country that is very determined about its reforms and therefore has been asked to join the Compact. It's a country that has set itself goals for driving this reform process further and is taking the steps, and it is showing results. Last year's GDP growth in Ghana was 8.5%. That, of course, compares really nicely with any European country, and that is where the potential is, and that's the potential that investors need to increasingly see and seize. We see such a growth also in other countries of the Compact with Africa, even countries that do not have natural resources. And what we see, and that's different from 20 years ago, is that African countries are beginning to get growth momentum, building on growth momentum on the basis of market-based reforms. And that is very promising. IFC has a very strong program in Ghana. Over the past 10 years, we have invested $4 billion in Ghana. And that, because IFC works with partners, it doesn't invest on its own. It reflects the opportunity, it reflects the fact that many are now recognizing these opportunities. The portfolio of IFC It's very diversified. It's oil and gas, of course, but it's financial sector, it's infrastructure, in particular ports, Tema Port, it's telecoms, it's manufacturing, agribusiness, tourism, real estate. It is across the board, and across the board there are opportunities, and it is becoming easier and easier to invest. What our investment partners value in particular is the political stability. We've heard it here before. They value the pro-business orientation, especially of this government. They value the market growth opportunities, of course. They also see challenges, and challenges that we see coming up again and again are linked to the commodities. Is Ghana going to be able to manage the commodities boom in a better way than some other countries have, without undermining the ability to diversify? Urbanization, like so many countries, Ghana is urbanizing very quickly. That brings all sorts of challenges. Past fiscal profligacy, which this government has been very determined to overcome. Financial sector fragilities, the lack of depth of the financial sector, and of course, a variety of development deficits around skills, around informality. Those are challenges that Ghana is facing and will need to tackle. There are also constraints on the private sector, which are come out very clearly in our conversations with investors. I was referring earlier to these the country private sector diagnostic that we have done, that we piloted in Ghana. Now we have some 20 of those going. We piloted it in Ghana. We interviewed some 200 investors and other partners. There are 4 things that I want to mention that come out, and which are things that need to be tackled to really push the envelope further for investment in Ghana. It includes the very steep decline in the doing business environment over the past few years. Now the government has really taken this on and is setting itself very ambitious targets to overcome that. Ghana was the leader in West Africa on the doing business environment, and it will get there again. The second area is access to finance, and that is perhaps the most pressing issue that partners mention. It's an issue in many countries that IFC is working in, but it comes out very strongly in Ghana, both the cost and the availability of finance. That again is something that both the government and we international and other institutions can help do something about. The cost of power and the reliability of power is a big issue for many sectors. And it is land, and it comes again and again, the land issue. We discussed this a little bit earlier. On all these areas, there are solutions. The authorities have identified solutions. We have discussed them. Many of the international players, the G20 and us international organizations, are working with the government to try to implement these solutions. We have to follow through on these plans. We have identified these and other very specific obstacles to private sector development in this country private sector diagnostic. I explained it a little bit before. The idea is that we have a common diagnostic base to engage with the World Bank on the public sector side, with other development partners, of course, with the authorities, but also with the private sector. And we hope that these can form a common focus for the reform program going forward. The 3 sectors that we particularly highlight there are agribusiness, ICT, and education. Now, we can convert all of these issues into opportunities within this fast-growing environment, and that is what IFC intends to do and what we hope to do with many of you. Our strategy for 2019 to 21 will see us stepping up very considerably, despite the already fairly large portfolio that we have in Ghana. We see that opportunity. We want to reach 12 million new energy customers. We want to reach SMEs with $800 million at least of financing. We want to establish 500,000 ICT customers where today they aren't. and so on. We have a list of very concrete targets that we see as feasible and that we want to achieve. The compact with Africa, and I'll put in another plug for it, is really an ideal platform to help us achieve that. And it's a platform where we, investors, organizations, government can help come together, identify and unlock such opportunities. Ghana has been a successful model. It's a role model in the region. It's been a role model for some time. It's been an inspiration to other countries. When I travel in Africa, we often refer to the Ghanaian success story. It's a powerful story. And we see that there's much more potential. There's also more to be done. And I hope that the forum today will further strengthen the public-private dialogue that is going to help us get there. With this, I pass it over to Accra. Thank you very much.
Very good. I understand that Yofi Grant is now going to say a few words. Yofi, please come to the podium. We are a few minutes early and we're waiting for the Deputy Minister.
Okay, I will start and you come and take my place in a few minutes. But I just wanted to highlight the importance of technology to the new direction in the economy, even before going into the details of fintech. And since the telecom sector was privatized, it's been one of the areas in which you've seen significant foreign direct investment actually play a role in the growth of the economy, either through jobs or either through facilitation of financial literacy, because suddenly everybody has a phone and everybody's using the phone to transact businesses. As we heard earlier on from the minister, mobile money transactions actually moved from about 6 billion in 2016 to almost 32 billion in 2017. That is a very good indicator of what fintech is doing in the economy. And even as I speak, I've stopped carrying cash because I don't need to carry cash. I pay everything through my mobile phone. But on the broader aspects of technology, technology is just no more a communication tool, but an economic enabler, a social enabler, and also has many applications in our new economy of Ghana. And as the president has said, and those of you who had his address, that we want to be the best place to do business in Africa, we are employing technology in many spheres. For example, creating an environment where engagement of the citizenry with government is efficient, is fast, and does not engage people. Now, that does two things. First of all, ease of transaction and ease of doing business, because you can actually do your purchases and your sales and then your payments all online. And that's just not about trade, but also, like I said, in the government's engagement in the citizenry. So with the utilities, for example, government is making efforts to ensure that we almost migrate everybody onto some sort of platform to remove as much human intervention as possible. The removal of human intervention is important for two reasons. First of all, to cut down bureaucracy, but also to cut down incidences of corruption, because then you don't have any human being to bribe. I mean, I can't see you deciding to bribe a mobile phone because you probably wouldn't know what you're doing. But so it's very important that we want to do that. And on the back of that, we have a number of projects going on. The first, most critical, is the national ID, where everybody in Ghana, both foreigners and indigents, are biometrically registered on a system that keeps that information. So if you're here, you have a digital imprint somewhere. In addition to that, government is also digitalizing the land assets of Ghana. So every 5 by 5 meter square has a digital address. Now, this is also very useful in helping to give everybody some addressing. So that I have a digital address for my home, which is GZ1741777. And I can apply it in many spheres. When somebody's looking for me, or I was surprised that I took an Uber and I was trying to, before I ordered the car, he took my location, but he was finding it difficult. So I asked him, is there any other way you can get there without me having to show 10 left and you get there? He says I should give him my digital address. And I was surprised. But he used it efficiently. And it worked. I don't know whether he was trying to brag to me but it did work. Then apart from that, we are looking at projects in which other services like taxation, etc., can be more efficiently monitored and managed. And so we've been talking with private sector players who are looking at actually providing a platform for that. Indeed, we've been engaged in a discussion with a foreign direct investor who wants to manufacture smartphones in Ghana, which will already be laden with facilitatory applications. For example, how you pay your water, your electricity, and you do the bank transactions, etc. Those are very important for us. So we do look forward to engaging, and we expect that the private sector will look at the opportunities that are there. I think government has made a clear commitment and support to this, and I just wanted to say a few things about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yofi Grant for that introduction to the session. And I should have said also thank you before that to Hans-Peter Lankes in Berlin for those very encouraging remarks about the private sector business environment in Ghana. Vielen Dank. So further to Yofi's introduction, I now have the greatest pleasure to introduce the Deputy Minister of Finance of Ghana, Honorable Charles Edubuahin. Honorable Charles Edubuahin, please come to the podium. And just a reminder that this is a joint session with Berlin. Honorable Minister, you're linked to Berlin via this camera there.
Which one?
That camera.
So does that mean I have to look at the camera?
You can look at that camera when you want to speak to Berlin. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I timed it exactly right. So we're talking about fintech and Ghana and where we position ourselves in the whole fintech space. And I'd like us to imagine a Ghana where individuals pay for goods and services using contactless ID or a QR code at any shop or within any street vendor in the country, where at the press of a button on their phones, heads of households can pay utility bills automatically generated by smart meters, where governments pay pensions, salaries, and social transfers via mobile money, but rather than cashing out, people keep money in the ecosystem, where the delivery of microcredit is immediately accessible to millions of people, enabled by innovative credit scoring algorithms, where farmers purchase insurance products to protect against droughts and other weather-related incidents, whilst daily tracking meteorological patterns and receiving advice on their phones, where market traders purchase innovative robo-investment products for their savings, where regulators use machine learning and AI techniques to identify fraud in the banking system, where urban migrants take out mortgages using land registries stored on a blockchain as collateral, where traffic queues at toll stations are eliminated as payment is automatically deducted from drivers' phones as they pass through, where government and citizens interact seamlessly to transform service delivery. In Ghana, this is what we are setting out to achieve as we seek to establish ourselves as the regional hub for fintech innovation. It is a future that is achievable, especially as we capitalize on what I like to call the 3 O's of fintech development: opportunity, openness, and optimism. The opportunity is huge. We have already seen this manifested in the pace of existing trends. The number of active mobile money customers has grown at about 100% each year, from 350,000 in 2012 to almost 12 million today. The total volume of transactions has grown by about 122% each year since 2012, and we are on course to eclipse 1 billion transactions this year. Over the same period, the total value of transactions has grown annually by over 200% to about 155 billion in 2017, and we're on course to do about 200 billion this year. But what does this mean in practice? It means that Abna, rather than carrying large amounts of cash at home at the end of a day's trade in Accra, can instead go to a teller and have the money securely loaded to a mobile account. This is the first time many like Abna, the previously unbanked, will have a safe place to store their money. But fintech is so much more than daily payments. It is credit, insurance, pensions, investments, blockchain. Leapfrog Investments has invested over 15 million in Ghana's insurance sector since 2012, increasing access to affordable insurance. Digital technologies can enhance education through distance learning and improve our health system through remote consultations. Blockchain land registries could enable new people to take out mortgages and reduce disputes over ownership, especially in a country where more than 80% of landowners lack proper titles. The opportunities are enormous for fintech to transform our economy, and it's already doing so. How about openness? Government initiatives. As a government, we are responding to these opportunities by getting out of the way and enabling an open and equitable environment for fintech to flourish. Led by the Office of the Vice President, we are implementing a number of initiatives to digitalize our economy and build a strong underlying infrastructure to power further growth. Such initiatives include the Ghana Post GPS addressing system to digitally identify all addresses in the country, the Ghana Card, a biometric ID which is about to be rolled out nationwide. It has a 148 kilobyte chip and has 14 different applications. Interoperability in mobile money payment systems, which allows for the transfer of money from one network to another without going through a third party or agent. A safer digital Ghana, launched just this week by the Vice President to ensure that increased digitalization is matched by strengthened cyber security. Government has also approved the Bank of Ghana's Payment Systems and Services Bill. Actually, I should say Cabinet has approved that, to open up and create a level playing field in the market, increasing competition, ensuring security, and driving financial inclusion. This will be tabled at Parliament once it reopens and is due to be passed by the end of the year. At the Ministry of Finance, we have been collaborating with CGAP of the World Bank and have had a number of consultative meetings with fintechs as we seek to enable the transition to a cash-light economy. Recognizing that smartphone penetration is one of the largest impediments to transformational fintech development, we are engaged in discussions to set up phone manufacturing plants in the country and offer smartphones to our citizens with no upfront costs and on affordable payment, pay-as-you-go type payment plans. Not only would this provide a strong platform for the fintech revolution, but also for social priorities of education, healthcare, and consumer protection. As a government, we are fully committed to driving an agenda that is open to all forms of fintech innovation as we establish the foundations of a Ghana beyond aid. Optimism, the future. And so, given the opportunity in the Ghanaian market and the openness of our policies, one cannot help but be optimistic about the future of fintech and innovation in Ghana. Unencumbered by legacy systems and institutions, we are well positioned to even leapfrog the developed countries. In 2015, CGAP described Ghana as, in some ways, the most digital financial service-ready country in Africa, end of quote. And now we are building momentum to realize this potential. Over 90% of adults use a mobile phone and have necessary ID to open an account. We have 95% numeracy, 74% of adults already send and receive text messages. We now have over 71 fintech incubators and accelerators. We actually have a tourist payment company that has quadrupled its revenues in 1 year through installing POS devices at tourist sites. We have a technology-based microcredit company that has acquired 1 million customers and issued 4.5 million loans across the country, all in the space of 1 year. Even Google chose Accra as a city to set up their first artificial intelligence lab in Africa. We may only be the second largest economy in West Africa, but with a sustained combination of innovation, government support, and private sector investment, we are determined to become the regional hub for fintech innovation and doing so to transform our economy and the lives of our people. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I believe we're now going to hand over to the moderator for this session, who's in Berlin, Mark Schiritz.
Yes.
Is
Yes,
the economics
that's me.
correspondent for Die Zeit newspaper in Berlin. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you for that enlightening speech. My name is Mark Schiritz. As has been said, I'm the economics correspondent of Die Zeit, a German newspaper. It's a great pleasure to be here. We have a really wonderful and competent panel, but we don't have so much time. So I'm trying to do the shortest introduction in the history of introductions, and just go ahead and hand over to Goodwin Anku in Accra from the Ministry of Finance. And each panelist now has 4 minutes, and I'll be very strict with the timing. And after that, we have a discussion. So, Goldwyn Anko, the floor is yours. 4 minutes, please. Ghana, yeah.
I'm Goldwyn Anko. I work at the Ministry of Finance. I'm the head of the Development Finance Unit in the Financial Sector Division of the Ministry. I'm actually deputizing for my director, Mr. Samson Kligo, who is out of the country on a mission. Thank you. Okay, at the minute, I think the topic that we are talking about now has to do with fintechs. At the Ministry of Finance, a number of initiatives have now been planned and being implemented to actually help our counterparts in the industry to operate effectively. We have developed a digital financial services policy, which is supposed to be used as the blueprint for driving this initiative. And this document covered issues of governance, innovation, regulation, capacity building, market development, product development, as well as security issues. We believe and know, based on our interactions with fintechs within the industry, that once we are able to roll out these policies, the policy actions within this document, will be in the position to provide the enabling environment and the collaboration that the fintech industry needs to actually move their agendas forward. Presently, we are in serious talks with the fintech industry to activate an e-transform platform that we have already got in the country. So far, we have had 2 meetings, and we have gotten to a point where we are collaborating with the Office of the Vice President to remove all the bottlenecks that were identified as a result of our discussions, so that going forward, this can be removed for our fintechs to get themselves plugged onto the platform so as to activate a G2P, a P2G payment platform that will also act as a catalyst for behavioral change that will actually drive our policy of transitioning the country from a cash-dependent economy into a cash-like economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Godwin Anko. We now go to Berlin, to the panel in Berlin, and I first would like to call on Roland Clausen, co-founder of Avamo in Frankfurt. Also 4 minutes for you. Roland, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mark, and for being here. It's a great pleasure for us. Thing is, Avamo is a company which offers a core banking system for microfinance institutions, and especially for small to medium microfinance institutions in the rural areas. And it was very interesting to hear about several concepts and approaches to improve the electronic infrastructure, especially in the fintech area. And we were being asked for impulses for this discussion, and my impulse would be that the traditional approach of fintech disruption, everyone's talking about disruption these days, and normally it has a positive touch. So everyone is considering that this has a positive effect. But there are also challenges when talking about fintech, and this is something which is very important to Avamo and its business model, because if you leapfrog a step in technological development, for example, you jump from an industrialized society to a digital society, you tend to centralize things. And disruption means cutting out different steps in the value creation chain, which generates a problem at the local level, in the local townships. So what we try to do is to merge the advantages of a fintech business model, which is basically offering a cloud-based software, which is very affordable, but providing rural and local providers with this software so that the income generation, which is already in place in local townships, for example, in microfinance institutions, you have cashiers and loan officers and managers of local mini banks, so to say, and they generate an income. And if you would traditionally disrupt this business, you would remove the revenue stream, the income from these local workforces. And what we try to do is to maintain the revenue streams in the rural areas by giving them technology. And what is important in the long run, I think, is to give the people in the rural areas, especially there, better access to refinancing opportunities. So banks can leverage their working capital because they work highly standardized. A bank can sell a loan portfolio to another bank. Microfinance institutions don't follow a certain standard, therefore they cannot resell their portfolios. And Avamo's vision is to standardize the sector in the rural areas, and therefore, by this standardization, giving them access to be able to leverage their working capital, because there's hundreds of millions of euros each year, which is intended for being invested into microfinance, which cannot be invested because there's no transparency, no reporting, no audit trail, no transparency. And if you can provide local institutions with that level of standardization and transparency, we think it will be possible to have much better targets for giving money to them and using it locally for a sustainable economic development. And this is my impulse for this discussion towards standardization and fintech.
Fascinating idea. Thanks also for highlighting some of the risk associated with leapfrogging. I think we will talk about that later. Now back to Ghana and to Tutu Aguiare, managing partner at Nubuke Investments, based in London and Accra.
Hi. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak at this event. I run an investment and advisory company, which is based in both London and Accra, invests all over the continent. Fintech is one of our areas of expertise, and we have been heavily involved in the journey that Ghana is going on, starting with the design of the digital addressing system, moving on to the biometric ID system, ensuring that interoperability was a key piece of this, adding to this universal coverage, which means that every citizen all over the country over the course of the next couple of years will be able to be online at all times. And the combination of this will then allow the government to move to the next level, which is move towards a cash-light, which I don't think is that ambitious, but rather cashless society. With the partners that we have encountered along the way, there is always a tension between trying to move very quickly, trying to support local businesses, and more importantly, trying to ensure that the appropriate structures and governance are in place. Some of the bigger, more traditional lending institutions and development institutions are actually behind the curve when it comes to the innovation. And sometimes when you look at the way the money is spent when it comes to procuring services, they're almost set in the dark ages. And there are many fintech companies in this room who have come across RFPs which they're perfectly capable of meeting, but they don't have 5 years of audited accounts, or they don't have a turnover of $20 million, or they're not a big company that a development institution can find very closely. And I mean, there are a number of those RFPs that actually exist right now as we speak in Ghana. And the final thing is that most of these RFPs don't have any local content requirements associated with them. I'm passionate about local content, and I think that if we are going to develop the industries, one of the things that we have to do as clients of these DFIs is to insist that local content forms the basis upon any contract that is given in this country. I even think we should go as far as, say, Nigeria, where Nigeria, if it can be tendered locally, if it can be done locally, it cannot be tendered internationally. Because the capability exists in country, and I am astonished at the quality of capability that exists in this country. And yet some of it, sometimes it's excluded purely because of the way the request is written, not because of the capability. So in this journey, we insisted that there was local content in the addressing system. It went to a local. We insisted that there was local content in the addressing system. It went to a local. And every time we insist, there are locals that rise to a challenge. So my piece of advice to all of you here is that with Compact for Africa, let us try and make sure that we actually get the local companies which have the expertise to benefit from this, rather than having foreign companies come in, do the work, go away, and never come back again. So that's my tuppence worth, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, very inspirational. Now back to Berlin, and we have Liv Freihaug from Director Industry Policy at the ICT Association in Oslo in Norway.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. So I'm Director of Policy at ICT Norway, the tech organization there, and I've spent a lot of time the past 2 to 3 years in helping to build the fintech ecosystem in Norway. I just want to start out by saying that I'm so impressed by what I've heard today from the Deputy Minister, especially on the initiatives that have been put in place in Ghana for fintech. The digital ID rollout, for example, is an extremely important infrastructure to have in place, and it seems that you're on a really good track. I just want to say a few short words on Norway before I go on to fintech, since we haven't been represented here earlier today. Norway has a very strong IT and tech sector. We're leading, especially in fields of digital strategy, digitization of public services, EdTech, educational technology, medical technology, financial technology. And an example of a Norwegian company investing heavily in Africa is Opera Software. The Opera browser is one of the leading mobile browsers across the African continent. And in the beginning of this year, they pledged a Africa First strategy, meaning that every new service that they roll out will be rolled out in Africa first. They've also committed $100 million to be invested in Africa. And of course, mobile technology is paramount if you want financial technology to roll out. So that's important. Norway is also a very big donor of development aid. And moving forward, we want to connect much more of our aid to technology. So being able to provide aid through helping to build digital societies in the countries that we aid, that's a major focus for Norway. Now, I'm no expert on Ghana, so you have to excuse me for that. But fintech is a relatively new industry everywhere, and I can draw from our experiences in Norway to share what I believe is important to keep in mind in building this industry anywhere, really. And given that you have talent and technological capabilities, I would say there are two things that are super critical in order to build a thriving fintech ecosystem. One of them is that you have a collaborative and trust-based relationship between incumbents and new young startup companies within the financial sector. So the big banks and the young entrants need to be able to collaborate and trust one another. And in Norway, this took a while. When I started out 2 to 3 years ago, there was, I wouldn't say a hostile environment, but it was definitely one lacking in trust. But now they're actively partnering, distributing one another's services. They are banks are investing in fintechs. They're mentoring them, and we have a very constructive relationship between the two. The other point is effective regulation, and there is no other tech industry which is so heavily regulated as that of fintech. So the fact that you have regulation which is effective, you do not need to deregulate when you build fintech. You actually need regulation, but it needs to be updated to accommodate new technologies and new business models. So that's my second big case. For one example, I know my time is running out, is crypto technologies and blockchain, which governments across the world are sort of having a hands-off approach to, and I think that's delaying the rollout of these technologies.
Okay. So you can see the music. Thanks, Liv, for that. I'm sure we will come back to some of the points you mentioned in the discussion later. We're now going back to Accra, to Romeo Bourgier, Managing Director at the IT Consortium. There. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Even though with IT Consortium, as I sit here, I represent the technology chamber, which fintech also is part of it. And just say some few things about what is happening here in the country. The fintech industry has grown rapidly over about 2 years. And with a lot of people doing things that sometimes when I hear the ministers talk about are things we want to do, are things we are already doing. And that is very encouraging. So I see it more of scaling up. For instance, I mean, we all want to push financial inclusion. Currently, we have companies that are doing pensions on the phone. And we are pushing also with remittance into pension, so that the focus is not just the local here, but even in diaspora, helping people to create wealth for themselves. And we, as an industry, trying to make sure that we hold one another accountable. That is why we are looking at self-regulation. So I agree with the aspect of regulations and all those kinds of things, which is good. I like what Bank of Ghana is doing. All we have been pushing is to be open, and which the minister talked about, so that our views will be carried along. And in this conversation, I'm also happy about the fact that there is recognition of the fact that there is capacity here. We have people that can do things. And we are very passionate about the fact that we don't want to engage on the fears that you just throw money in and you take everything out. We believe in partnership, and partnership with the outside world, and partnership with the banks. Because just as the Lux in Berlin talked about, we've had the issue of uncertainties with the banks and the fintechs and things like that. But over the years, I think the confidence is coming up. And so as we seek to scale up, and I want to use the word scale up in what we are trying to do, we require support, not just in money, but support in capacity building, so that these young companies, these startups, start up well. Because one of the problems we have in fintech industry is somebody starts without any regulation, without any standards, and then disrupt financial systems. And I think this is something that is really on the mind of BOG, Bank of Ghana, and also on the industry as a chamber, that we make sure that we do things right in a way that we do not cause government to come and worry us and make sure we are doing things right. So right things are being done, and we hope that with the support and the infrastructure that is being put in place by government, it will be very easy for us to be able to scale. And that is what we push for. We push for local content, we put for collaboration, and we also push that government will be open in their dealings with fintech. And we are very happy with the engagement that we've been having. But we want to make sure that we can scale so that our population can be taken care of. Pension is important, and I'm passionate about pension. Insurance is important. We are not just facilitating payments. And that is not where the focus really is. But we want to be able to create wealth through the technology that we are engaged in, creating wealth and not put too much restriction. I remember we had a conversation some few months ago where the issue of innovation with respect to regulation came up. And we were saying that with every industry across the world, when things start, don't put too much restriction. Allow innovation to grow, and as it grows, you bring in the restrictions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Back to Berlin now. Our next speaker is Shil Komimaglu, CEO at MES and DAK Corporation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. MES and DAK is the name of the company. I reframe that appropriately. We are in business to empower small, medium-sized enterprises, the so-called MSMEs. We do this through a digital ecosystem we have built. We tell a business owner, come on a platform, open your profile like you do on Facebook or LinkedIn, and have access to online shop to start selling online in addition of your offline business. First steps. Second step, we have integrated into this platform an ERP solution. This ERP solution, within a period of 3 to 6 months, we help business owners structure the business, best understand the business so that they can grow the business. This is put in place with a tool we call strategic development plan, which is digitized. So this helps the business owner best manage his business. Once this strategic plan is put in place, the business owner needs financing to grow his business or to execute the plan in the business. This is where our fintech solution comes in place. Within our fintech solutions, there's a 2 key components. First, digital tax solution that help the business owner pay fair and transparent tax. Is an issue. We don't have time to go that now. But second tool is a funding canvas. A funding canvas is a set of informations lender or investor need to look at it before taking decision of funding. Yet it's digitized, meaning that we are connecting fund seeker with fund provider in one place on one platform. It's a great deal of time, resource, and risk associated with funding. Now, once the company receives funding, we stay behind a company to follow its growth path that's been designed in this ERP solution. Thank you. On the top of that, we see a great deal of connecting those companies yet having strategic development plan, receive funding with players in Germany. There's a great deal of opportunity connecting SMEs in Africa on a growth trajectory, receive funding and looking for quality, robust machinery to execute the plan. In terms of challenges, generally speaking, we see 2 areas. As a digital entrepreneur, we having a problem of pre-seed and seed funding, which is lacking on the market. This is an issue that development financial institutions, government, policymakers, but also local financial institutions has to put in place. Yet we don't know how to fund digital entrepreneur. Also, as digital entrepreneur in Ghana, once I find my business, once I find my market and product fit, I must be capable to scale, at least in sub-region of Africa. Yet we have regulation in Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, impeding me to scale. So those are the challenges we see on the market. So in a nutshell, what MES and DAK does is following. We are solving the problem of access to market for small business owner. Second, we are solving the problem of access of technical assistance by bringing an innovative ERP solution in place. And third, we are contributing to reduce the finance gap. Bottom line of what we are doing here is that if SME is starting growing, they will create wealth and more important, jobs. And that's what we need. So Mestak is in business to create jobs. Stop there.
Thank you very much. We're going back to Accra. One more time to William Senyo, co-founder and CEO of Impact Hub.
Okay, thank you. I think if I understood my job right, I'm supposed to bring the hustler's perspective to this conversation, so I'll do exactly that. So there's a lot of high-level conversation around what needs to happen, and Charles here eloquently laid out government's ambition of the ideal society we want to see when it comes to financial technology. And there's been a lot of organic growth that has happened, and much of that came from grassroots innovators working in dark shadows, very much feeding back off of what Tutu says. We need to find a way to empower those local innovators as we move this forward. We could easily, rapidly do most of these things with external capacity, but would there be retention to actually consistently and sustainably keep the momentum going? And so my company, the Impact Hub, Accra, has been working over the last 5 years in especially intentionally focused on how do you create a local pipeline of innovators who can work with meager resources and be able to make the cost of innovation as low as possible, regardless of the market conditions. Now, how do we? The Impact Hub has been an incubator around the world for the past 15 years and 100 locations. So leveraging that global community expertise to find a way to bring local talents up. Now, Charles talks about openness on the government side. What we see early stage innovators need to be able to thrive and take advantage of this enormous opportunity locally is this appetite for experimentation. We shouldn't be able to figure everything out before we hit start. Now, on the government side, sometimes you can see a hesitation to be open to experimentation. What that means is that the curve of growth for early stage innovators in the fintech space can be really long because you are dealing with bureaucrats who are not open to experimentation. So what we are trying for in markets that we see fast-paced growth in these things, we are seeing ideas around regulatory sandboxes, for example, where the regulator says that, okay, this is might be too crazy to take mainstream right now, but how can we create a little sandbox where we can all play, actively monitor something, and over time find a way to mainstream it? And some of these ideas are coming from unlikely places like Sierra Leone. And we think that if the organic momentum Ghana has had can't be stalled by that bureaucratic regulatory barrier. And so it will be interesting to see how this push for financial technology and global engagement can also work in relation to mostly young innovators actively taking part in this thing. And there's also questions around anomalies in the Ghanaian economy specifically, which somehow you can't seem to understand. Anywhere else in the world, e-commerce growth is tied to financial technology growth. In our case, sometimes you see e-commerce not actively engaging financial technology. There's cash still in systems. You go anywhere else in the world, there's no cash on Uber, but you come to Ghana, there's cash on Uber. How do you integrate global systems like that into Ghanaian systems? So there's conversations at a level that needs to be had that can engage local innovators as well. And we need to see more of that as we make this push. Thank you.
And our last speaker here in Berlin is Stefan Zelazny, Chief Innovation Officer at Mobisol, based in Berlin.
Thank you very much. My name is Stefan Zelazny. I'm representing Mobisol here. Mobisol is a Berlin-founded developer and distributor of solar home systems. And there might be the question right now in the room, why is a solar home system provider here on the FinTech panel? And no, it's not a mistake. I would like to give you 3 reasons for this. First of all, FinTech as you all might know, is basically very much based on the use of smartphones. If you go away from the very basic mobile money provision, everything that is like coming now into the market is based on smartphone use. And smartphones have to be recharged basically every day. We are not happy with that, but it didn't change too much over the last years, and I don't expect it to change heavily too. If you have no access to energy somewhere in the rural areas, in the rural off-grid areas, you're very much limited to use your smartphone because basically you have to charge it every day by walking to a place where you can charge your phone. That is like an inconvenience for people not being confronted with that every day, but if you have to live with that, it really hinders you to consume the services of fintech. So that's an obvious reason why access to finance and access to off-grid rural, energy is necessary for basically fintechs and access to finance on a certain leverage here. Secondly, as we started our operations back in 2011 in East Africa, we realized our potential customers, customer base in the rural off-grid communities, they don't have the financial means to buy a solar home system that can be priced between whatever $500 up to $2,000 for small businesses. So basically the upfront affordability was very, very much limited. So what we had to do, because there were no financial services around in the rural areas, we had microfinance institutions, but mostly they are in the urban, peri-urban regions, not that much in the very, very rural regions where we are operating. So what we have to offer is to say we bundled our solar home systems with a mobile money payment system and a pay-as-you-go technology that enables the system as soon as the customer pays. So basically we added a microfinance kind of scheme, a pay-as-you-go kind of scheme to our solar home systems and sold these to our customers. And to our happy surprise, people really kept up a high repayment morale because the use of energy is such a high value that people don't want to lose it again, if they ever got the advantage of this. And especially as it substitutes fossil fuels that are very expensive in the rural areas to this as well. Third year, I have a good minute to go. In the last years, we have realized as Mobisol that there's challenges on the ground, and I think I would like to pick up a little bit the point that Mr. Clausens made. It makes no sense to centralize it in a Germany-based company who would basically distribute solar systems on the ground. So we transform Mobisol, and we are in the process of doing this, into a technology provider for local partners. So basically we partner up with local entrepreneurs, with local companies in the region, in the off-grid region in Africa and even beyond Africa, and we offer them technology. We offer them software, we offer them hardware, we offer them integration into real technical devices that they can then sell on a microfinance scheme. Yeah, so it's a kind of asset-backed, technology-powered financing that we are offering to local partners. This is really taking up. We are working with partners in Ghana right now who are using our technology to distribute solar off-grid power to rural households without reinventing the wheel over and over again. And I think this will serve to create value in the local areas, not somewhere else. And it will still make benefit of the technology we basically developed already in the last years and to make it more efficient and more impact-driven on the ground.
Thank you, Stefan. One of the topics that came up in all the contributions, of almost all the contributions, was access to finance. I would like to talk a little about this issue. So we heard in the area of payments that some progress has been made, a lot of progress has already been made. So I would be interested in how you see how we can expand this, or whether fintech can expand this more in the direction that Jill has mentioned: businesses, loans, insurance, pensions. So what is the potential to enlarge, the good that fintech can bring to the wider society? So whoever has, and maybe Liv, Jill, you start, and then
the problem.
Take the other one. Yeah.
The problem of access to finance, when I look at it from the small business perspective, is a multi-dimensional and chronic problem existing for long. And the study of the World Bank in association with IFC come up that we are talking about for Africa and Middle East about 526 billion USD per year in terms of finance gap. So when you look at the problem, you have the SMEs have in their corner their own problems, but also financial institution does have their problem also in their corner, but also government also have its own problem. So when you bring fintech solution into this environment, you are just solving a part of the problem. For this reason why we create an ecosystem that at the heart of this ecosystem we have a platform. A platform allowed us to bring those three stakeholders in one place, help them individually with specific solution, and bring them together to interact with each other. This is how we can solve that problem. I mean, the fact is that all the institutions were trying for long to solve that problem individually, but it won't work because the problem is affecting those three stakeholders. So digital ecosystem is a way forward.
Any other views? Yeah, Liv, please.
I think, is this on? Yeah.
Yeah.
So access to finance is an issue for companies, especially SME companies across the world. In Europe, access to finance for a young company is really difficult, and fintech solutions are ameliorating that because they're bringing new. First of all, they're saying, listen, we have a solution which is competing with or delivering something that banks are not willing to deliver. You have crowdfunding platforms for SMEs, for example, which bring together people with money to that they want to invest with small companies that need to borrow money, and they're not getting those loans in banks. So they may have to pay a slightly higher interest rate than they would if they got a loan in a bank, but still at a very competitive level. So that's an example of how a fintech solution can actually provide access to finance to groups that were previously, not being given that possibility.
Do we have any thoughts on that from Ghana, especially on the regulatory side of this discussion?
Okay.
Whoever wants to take the floor, please take the floor.
Okay, so on the access to finance question and how fintech enables it, especially for SMEs, my experience has been that there's less of that locally, at least in terms of mid-sized loans that are enabled by fintech platforms. For example, I recently needed to raise about $80,000 just bridge finance to finance a solar power system for a 10 megawatt kilowatt hour solar power system. And no bank here could immediately do it at terms that were acceptable. But in 30 days, managed to get that on Kiva at a really affordable, in 48 months, be able to pay that and get that money in 30 days through crowdfunded Kiva. So a lot more of that could be disruptive locally, but these platforms are not necessarily local yet. So as we talk about these things, the local banking environment should, again, the idea of experimentation, be open to some of these ideas that are slightly uncomfortable given the traditional form of banking most of them are used to. It could be interesting to have, again, sandboxes where they are testing out these ideas and seeing whether the local market is able to adopt and build an effective model around something like that. So it would be interesting to see how that plays out, especially for SMEs.
I would like to point additionally is...
I think you're not on. Yeah, there's one more voice in Ghana, and then we go back to Roland here in Berlin. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to say something in terms of the regulatory side. I think that when you want to do the right thing, sometimes you can get yourself in a situation where it doesn't allow you to be able to grow. So for what you said, I mean, if you are doing peer-to-peer lending in this country, I don't know what Bank of Ghana will say. If it is just a matter of the platform, it's very easy to build a platform. I mean, very, very easy to build a platform that allows people to be able to do that. But the regulatory side, if there is a guideline to this, then people can feel comfortable to do it. But we are saying that sometimes allow things like that to happen and then follow up with the guidelines instead of trying to have the regulation before anybody can innovate in this area. When it comes to financing to SMEs, that is fine. But for me, I once said that I'll be very happy, I'll be very satisfied when I walk to the roadside and I'll be able to buy something with my mobile money and just get some roasted plantain and walk away. So that woman or that person selling there can have financial records. And when that person has the financial records, then he will be able to get get credit. And I think that is where we are going with the digitization. So whether it is SMEs, middle, or whatever, helping people to be able to keep financial records is one thing that I think can help with allowing the financial formal system to help. But whatever you do, the banks are very rigid, and they are very rigid. There are things that we do that can be used to help people. I mean, we have companies here that are doing something that you can think of as lending, but it's really not lending. But they see a need, and then they are fulfilling it. So if the regulators can speed up and also not restrict us too much so that innovation can go on without us being punished.
Roland? Additional point, and this is we're always talking about SME companies, more or less professional sector, even in other countries, for example in Ghana. There is another sector of the financially excluded, where it's not only the access to finance itself, but also affordability. And we had experiences where we saw that our customers, the MFIs, the microfinance institutions, issued loans, actual loans, with interest rates of around 300% per year, which has different reasons. But one of these reasons, this is exactly what you pointed to, there are no reliable financial track records, no credit history, so the risk is very high. There's a lot of fraud going on. And fintech can solve many of these problems, especially within this bottom of pyramid population, not only in the more or better developed sector, where we're talking about like 80,000 euros for a solar park, which is a very professional undertaking. So we're also talking about the grassroots of society, the lady who runs a kiosk and needs some 100 euros or dollars to make up for some additional supply, stuff like that. So affordability in combination with technology, it's closely interconnected, and I think technology can greatly serve the affordability and also, of course, the bare access to finance. Yeah, please.
I think also it's an important thing to just mention that fintech can play an important role in reducing the risk of other foreign investments, because financial technology can bring a lot of financial literacy to people and businesses, create more transparency in financial transactions, and can educate people and businesses on accounting, on cash flow management, inventory, things like this. And I think those are very important measures to reduce the perceived risk of investing in a country like Ghana.
Yeah, Stefan.
Another thing, just to emphasize on what Roland especially said right now, the example of not only the access but the affordability for financing. I mean, what we have done in the last 2 years in Tanzania, for example, we worked together with a local bank, not a microfinance institution, but a local bank that was basically only operating in the rural, maybe peri-urban regions, but not in the off-grid rural regions. And basically, we offered them a new way of selling their product, their loan product, to our customers, basically, to refinance the solar systems, but at the same conditions they can offer to urban customers. Because by use of technology, the risk for them is not higher, and the associated overhead cost as well. So basically, they can make the same margin on the credit, and therefore can give the same affordability conditions to the rural customers than, and the grassroots, the bottom of the pyramid rural customers, than to their urban, let's say, middle class customers. And I think that is only possible by technology, and that could really reach into the millions and the hundreds of millions of people who are absolutely not only underserved but badly served in terms of affordability.
Maybe we can. We have about 5 more minutes. Maybe we can also talk a little about what can be done or should be done from the donor side or from the international community side to facilitate, that use of fintech as a means of financial inclusion. Maybe back to Accra. What are your views here? What should things be done differently?
I mean, this is Tutu again. I think I mentioned earlier that the donor community tends to be quite rigid in its approach when it comes to the fintechs, and the bar to qualify to be able to get access to the things that are needed is sometimes far too high. And some of the policy frameworks that are being promoted are still, I guess, I say set in the dark ages, but a set of a time, which isn't today. So you have lots of young fintech companies who can provide services, and yet are not able to meet the criteria unless they go through very rigid processes, which, for some of these guys, they can't even fill out the pages and pages and pages of forms. So I think that there needs to be a little bit more risk associated with the money that the donors give to the smaller communities, and maybe meeting up with the chamber and lending to the chamber, who then on lend is a way of doing it. Lend to somebody you trust or lend to an association. Very similar to what we do in our villages. Rather than lend to one fintech company, why don't you lend to an association of fintech companies and let them decide how the capital is allocated under strict criteria? Those are new ways of doing things, and I'd like to see those explored, but I worry sometimes that the lens through which the lending comes or the ideas comes are set far set to the dark ages.
We have a personal experience at the Ministry of Finance. There are a number of donors that we've been dealing with relating to supporting fintechs. What you realize is that most of the times, the criteria that are mentioned as those that will have to be fulfilled are so high that even very innovative firms that do not have the financing muscle or long years of history behind them are unable to access these facilities. On the other hand, sometimes government will want to go in a particular way. Government will want the financing to be targeted towards a particular need. But in some of the cases, what you see is that a donor insists that the funds should be used in a way that does not actually relate to what government actually needs. So that struggle between getting the funding, addressing a particular problem, and doing the wish of the donor becomes a constraint that actually does not help in accessing this kind of fundings whenever they are made available. So what I want to suggest here is that whenever donors want to provide funding for such innovations, they should be open enough to listen and also take on some of the ideas and philosophies that government has as an internal need that government wants to satisfy. That way, we would be in a position to also collaborate and benefit mutually from whatever interventions that those funds will be applied on. Thank you.
Yeah. Take the other one, maybe. Is there another one? No, the one on the right. Yeah.
One, two?
Yeah.
I just want to add a note of what has been said, but no matter where you are, whether in Europe, in Africa, small business have to do bookkeeping and accounting. That's a begin for everything. From there, we have business record. From business record, once you have a strategic development plan, from there you address your needs. Once you have your need clearly defined, then financial institution can support you. Then you can benefit from incentive from government and so on. So the job is very well at the corner of small businesses. This is the reason why we have integrated accounting solution in our ERP solution available on each and every mobile phone. That's the beginning of the journey. Thank you.
Thank you. We could go on for at least another hour, but unfortunately we run out of time. Please, a big round of applause to the panel here and in Accra for... Thank you for being here. Thank you for this really fascinating discussion. And we now have the intervention by Mr. Noke, is that correct? Who I give the floor to. And we are off. Thank you.
Excellencies, representatives of our partner ministries and partner institutions, representatives of Ghanaian and German companies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be here with you in Berlin and in Accra, remotely, of course. On behalf of Chancellor Angela Merkel and the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, I would like to thank you all for the fruitful discussions we had today. I particularly would like to thank the organizers, IFC Germany, who enabled this exchange about investment opportunities in Ghana across sectors, continents and time zones. This innovative conference format demonstrates high digitalization, facilitates communication and cooperation. I'm sometimes a champion for using digital technologies in development cooperation in our ministry, and I'm glad to see that the technology did not let us down. African countries are increasingly attractive for the private investment because of stability in many regions, growing markets through regional integration and improvements in the investment climate. Ghana is a prime example for that, which is, with its vision of Ghana Beyond Aid and its status as a reform champion recognized through the membership in the G20 Compact with Africa initiative. Germany is keen to accompany Ghana on its reform and investment mobilization agenda towards Ghana Beyond Aid. To that end, we have a we can also call it investment partnership between Ghana and Germany in the context of the Marshall Plan of our ministry, which is part of the German contribution to the Compact with Africa. Under the reform and investment partnerships, we provide additional financial support to reforms in the Ghanaian energy sector. But I would like to add the idea of the reform partnerships is not to speak about money, but it's much more about cooperation and how we can push the private sector and economic growth. The partnership represents a change in the long-standing development cooperation between Ghana and Germany. We are going beyond traditional development aid, using our aid in order to leverage private sector investments in Ghana. So we have changed the narrative, but maybe not everywhere what we are doing. The vision behind this is that the private sector will enable Ghana to make a transformative change to create jobs and economic growth. I recently accompanied Chancellor Merkel to Ghana, where we had lively dialogues also with this, people from the hub on the reform efforts, on the opportunities for the German business delegation, and with the dynamic domestic private sector, especially, I mentioned it, startups. I am glad that the dialogue continued today with the G20 Compact with Africa, Germany, Ghana Investors Forum. Let me summarize the highlights of today's exchange as I take them away, or more or less noted by my personal advisor. I am again impressed by the dynamism and the optimism for a bright Ghanaian future. Yes, there are still challenges, but these challenges are being addressed in a proactive, practical way towards Ghana Beyond Aid. I observe a similar dynamism at the level of the development partners in the area of de-risking and insurances. MIGA, but also the German government have a number of options already and are developing new instruments to reduce risk for the private sector. I would like to say a simple sentence. It is in the interest of the government or in our interest as politicians that private companies will go to Africa and will invest in African countries. And that means we have to not only to call for those steps towards Africa, but we have also to support and to create the instruments for de-risking such investments. I'm pleased that representatives from G20 country Turkey and from G20 guest country Norway attended the event in Accra or here in Germany. This is encouraging for the sustainability of the Compact Initiative. For the automotive industry, we heard about the importance of the first investor. Even if there is a good business environment and a reform-oriented government, it is not guaranteed that there will be enough demand for a decent return on investment. At some point, the investor has to take the risk. This is easier for large multinationals than SMEs. Here, it is important to have available, the insurance instruments, and we are developing such new instruments also in Germany. There is a potential for a success story for German automotive industry in Africa, similar to Asia. However, there are still elements that are not fully in place. Regional integration, to have the necessary market size, lower borrowing rates to make consumers' loans more affordable, also maybe more vocational training, and reputation for such a career as a skilled worker in a factory, and maybe several other things. I am encouraged by the fact that Africa is pushing for the African continental free trade area, which would provide a huge incentive in terms of market size for production. We need good governance, of course, but three other things for increasing productivity. The market size is important, the skilled labor force, and, of course, the infrastructure. And the compact with Africa is about the infrastructure. My minister has spoken about 25% spending for education from our budget and the development cooperation. And of course, the market size is the endeavor of this continental free trade area by the Africans themselves and the African Union. That means, from the European perspective, we have to integrate in our instruments in North African countries. We should not divide in the next term of midterm financing the European Neighborhood Instrument and the development cooperation in different parts, but we have to use the money from the neighborhood cooperation also for political issues and investments in Africa. So we have to understand European development cooperation under the umbrella or the old ACP agreement or the EDF. So that's a very important part for our side here in Germany and Europe. Let me also mention Ghana has fully understood the importance of the CFTA by applying to host its secretariat. Congratulations to that. I think that's also a good signal for Ghana as a big hub for such a development. The situation for the food industry is slightly different. The industry is already established and growing. The challenge is for Ghana to move up the value chain to agri-processing and to become a regional hub also for this sector. Some of the constraining factors are land issues, access to water, infrastructure, and high energy prices. As mentioned before, the energy sector is the focus of the Ghana-Germany Reform and Investment Partnership, so we hope that this constraint will be addressed. IFC committed to tackling the land issue, so we hope to see progress here too. The keywords of the last panel, mentioned at the last panel, were standardization, leapfrogging, transparency. Fintech is an interesting point. We heard about the opportunities of fintech. Fintech is one of the fastest growing sectors and contributes to more jobs. First of all, it is becoming easier access to finance. So that's very important. It is an economic and social enabler. It cuts down bureaucracy and corruption for business, for government and citizens. For instance, national ID, mobile payment, taxation, all this were mentioned. Challenges are access for local and rural areas or level, local content. And of course, that's the main issue maybe everywhere, trust and an enabling environment are needed to avoid corruption and all this what is hesitating German and European companies. I would like to add a simple example to this last session from Germany that perhaps even everyone in Germany has not really realized. A fintech company called Wirecard is entering the DAX, the German stock exchange, and will replace the Commerzbank. That's an interesting point, and the market value, the stock market price of Wirecard is higher than that of the German bank. So that's what's going on in Germany, and what many of Germans have not realized. So, and of course, we can learn from each other, and that is a good message also from such a dialogue. It is a pleasure for me to close this groundbreaking event, and I would like to thank you again for contributing towards its success. I hope you appreciate this opportunity discussing promising Ghanaian industries and networking across continents. Here is how we will continue the dialogue. 4 points. G20 Investment Summit with Compact with Africa countries on October the 30th of October here in Berlin. The Chancellor invited all heads of state and government to Berlin from the Compact countries. And there will be also a conference before. The Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development is bringing the digital fair, Republica, to Accra, Ghana in December 2018. The aim is to strengthen the dialogue on digital topics between Germany and Africa. It's not only focused on Ghana. From 7th to 9th of November, the annual investors meeting of the African Development Bank is taking place in South Africa. It's also an interesting event, maybe more for African companies, but people also from the ministry and from the Ministry of Finance will be there, and we will push the Compact with Africa initiative. And last, the third German African Business Summit from 11th to 13th of February is taking place in Accra in the next year. Let me conclude by underlining the importance of dialogue and partnership between Europe and Africa with the words of Chancellor Angela Merkel. Africa's well-being is in the interest of Europe and Germany. So let's work together for the well-being of both of our continents. Thank you all. Good afternoon to Accra and good evening to Berlin. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I say, Dankeschön, Gunther Noker, for that very inspiring end conclusion and for representing the German Chancellor. And from our end here, let's invite Yofi Grant to give the closing remarks on behalf of Accra.
Thank you very much, Herr Gunther Noke, for your closing remarks. And I can only end by saying, wow, what a day. It's been a very interesting and insightful as well as invigorating day, and very inspiring as well. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, the IFC, who this afternoon assumed the position of our landlords and have kept us here. I think that the nature of the conference definitely epitomizes your tagline, creating markets, creating opportunities, and we want to say a big thank you for that. We'd also like to thank the government of Ghana, of which I'm part, and then the Deutsche Zusammenarbeit, which is German corporation, and then, of course, the CWA, G20, and then the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and KFW. A sincere gratitude for putting this together. And then, of course, we can't leave out the actual participating partners. ACEPT, African Center for Economic Transformation, Africa Verein, and ESMT. I'm told that the event in Berlin is taking place at the ESMT office. That's correct. And then, of course, Ghana Investment Promotion Center. And then our networking partners, that's Convent from Deutschland, and then IBF. But I must say, I think we should all give a great applause to Maleki for actually putting the technology together. I have been singularly impressed. It's gone through seamlessly and creates, it's one of the demonstrations of innovation which we embrace. I think today discussed three main issues: agriculture, fintech, and then, of course, the automobile industries. And we had presentations and actual debates on panels concurrently in Accra and Berlin, which was particularly impressive. And I would like to say that, yes, all these are really in the space of opening the opportunity. I think for me, with all the panels, what I really take away from it is what the Deputy Minister of Finance expressed, the 3 O's: opportunity, openness, and optimism. And that synchronizes very well with where Ghana is and what we want to do. I dare say that Ghana is open for business. We are ready for business. Even as we pursue a Ghana beyond aid, we are looking for partnerships, sustainable partnerships, and relationships that will enable us achieve our targets, which are also very synchronized with the SDGs. And so this, we believe, is the first of many such occasions under the CWA. We know that there will be a Ghanaian delegation to Berlin in the next few weeks, and we'll continue the story and continue the engagement. But we'll embrace the opportunities, both here and in Berlin, to increase our engagement in the business field. So thank you very much. But I can't end without saying a spectacular thank you to Dr. Angela Merkel, Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, for opening remarks which were very insightful. And of course, to His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, who they were both present here by video as the conference was going on, and therefore participated with us, and they were very, very instrumental in getting this to happen. But we can't leave without also talking about saying a big thank you to the World Bank president. And in fact, as we're closing, I just got a hit on my Twitter feed from the World Bank president, thanking and applauding Ghana for their focus on jobs in Africa, that 90% of the jobs in the developing countries are by private sector. And the more the developed countries invest, the better in human capital development to create conditions for business to thrive and to remove and exclude poverty. So we do say a sincere thank you to him. Ghana is open for business. Ghana is ready. And so I entreat all of you to embrace that opportunity in all openness and with optimism. Thank you very much for being here today.